It can be with or without driver. It just depends on the specific race that you're racing. I work full time. I go to law school. I race full time. The Silver Crown cars are an open wheel aspect car. We have a roll cage because the proportionality of the fallout rates, or the drop off rates, if you will, as people progress up the ladder for females, it is such an exaggerated higher percentage rate or proportionality rate than it is for the males. It's actually pretty astonishing. Racing USAC, the USAC sanctioning body, there were no females in the Silver Crown series. So I always questioned if that's something that I would even have the opportunity of doing. I think where they come together is if I eventually want to do motorsports law, like, or practice within sports and entertainment law.
Good evening, everyone. I'm really delighted to bring you today's guest. Okay, it's a racing driver, for sure. We've had a few of those, but we've also got a current law student rolled into one, an ambassador for women in motorsport. We're very privileged to have the honor of an intelligent and amazing guest. Taylor Fern, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you? Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm ecstatic. Really looking forward to having a chat. Thanks for giving us your time. I'm famed or vaguely famed. My research ahead of. You've got your own website, which makes things really useful and better than trying to read LinkedIn. Tell me, it goes all the way back to like the noughties. You've been doing motorsport since maybe before you could walk. What are your earliest motorsport memories?
Yeah, so I come from a racing family, essentially. My uncles on my maternal side raced throughout the 80s and 90s, and so I grew up around it. So here in the US, like a big thing for us is the infamous Super Bowl. And so for my family, like instead of having big Super Bowl parties, we had big Daytona 500 parties, which is to celebrate like the big NASCAR race of the year over here in the States. And um, because of that familial background that I had around motorsports. But I guess one of my memories is probably when I was about 3 or 4. I remember watching a race that had Jeff Gordon and I think Dale Earnhardt, and I remember just knowing like there wasn't a lot of visible females within motorsports at that time, especially when I was that young. I mean, that was probably in the late 90s. And I didn't know if I was ever gonna like actually race, but I just knew that I was gonna do something within racing. And so not too long after that, a few years later, my dad found a quarter midget, which is similar to a go-kart, but it has a roll cage around it. And we drove like 2 hours to go see this quarter midget that was for sale. And I ended up sitting in the car and just falling in love to where I sat in the car for like an hour and my parents had to pull me out of it just because it was like instant butterflies. So here we are to tell the tale almost 20 years on. So it's been quite a ride.
Well, yeah, I mean, so I'm obviously from the UK. You might be able to tell from my accent, but word midget, I think of US racing. I think of ovals, and yeah, the roll cage. So, can you tell us a bit more? When you say quarter midget, what does that mean?
So if you're familiar with like full size midgets or sprint cars or Silver Crown cars, which are open wheel cars to us in the US, but they just have roll cages around them. So a quarter midget is basically a quarter size midget. In the US, a full size racing midget is about 900 to 1,000 pounds. It can be with or without driver. It just depends on the specific race that you're racing. And then a full size midget is about 350 to 400 horsepower. So a quarter midget, which is a quarter like 200 to 300 pounds, depending on what division we were in. And then they just had little 30 horsepower engines. So that's kind of like what I started racing in before I went up the ladder until eventually I got to racing full-size midgets, sprint cars, Silver Crown cars. I did some Formula racing as well. So yeah, that's a little bit of a synopsis on them.
That's really useful to hear, because I think here in the UK, go-karting is essentially the predominant sort of car racing for people that. So you talked about this being almost 20 years ago. So how old were you? About 7 or 8 or something in a car with an engine and driving around? When did you have your first race in one of these things?
Yeah, so I was 6 years old. I'm 26.
Wow.
I'll be 27 in December this year. So yeah, I started when I was 6. And yeah, I think my first race was in the middle, like June-ish of 2002. And I've been hooked ever since. I did take a little bit of time off when I started going to a university. When I was 19, my family kind of wanted me to focus on my education, because I was kind of like at a point in my career where if I was to go any further within motorsports, it obviously is a big financial sacrifice, as I'm sure you might be aware. And so I didn't really have like the funding up until that point to really go any further. And so it was just kind of at that point trying to like build a life for myself to where I could race, but then also make a living, maybe doing something else as well. So
Yeah.
here we are. I work full time. I go to law school. I race full time. So I wear multiple hats.
I honestly envy your time management. I do a job. I have a young family. That's probably the most that you're going to get out of me. So that's really incredible. So you're a current law student. Are you specializing in anything specific? How does it work? And what are you studying?
Yeah, so within law, you don't really, at least in like under American law studies, you don't specifically graduate with a law degree specializing in anything. You just kind of get your Juris Doctorate, and then you proceed to take the bar within whatever state within the US that you want to practice in. And then from there, you just kind of pick a field that you want to specialize in. Now, you might already have an idea throughout internships or externships or clinicals on what you may want to practice. And some people go on to get their LLM, which is basically like a master's in law, which you can specialize in a certain segment of law by doing that. But I kind of have an idea of what I want to do. I think I want to do something within business law to where I could kind of utilize that within my motorsports career, because I have a lot of connections with people in motorsports, especially within my Women in Motorsports North America group that I'm involved in. That includes Lynn St. James, Beth Coretta. I know someone mentioned Sabra Cook earlier on, the Andrettis. So there's a lot of people, like a lot of big names within motorsport that are involved within this Women in Motorsports group, and including some motorsports attorneys. So I think that may be the route that I go, but we'll see. I have a year left to kind of decide what I initially want to get into.
God, that's really fascinating. So I asked you this question before, but you've got your kind of legal side, and I think I saw a picture on your Instagram where you're sort of and looking ready for the courtroom, and then you've got your motorsport side and you're ready, in your motor kit. Is there any crossover, like being behind the wheel, being in the courtroom, etc.? Like, is there a mindset? Is there anything, or do you see yourself as almost inhabiting two different personalities?
In ways, it's almost kind of like if you've seen those, I forgot what the exact word of it, but it's kind of like those circle charts to where they'll overlap in the middle, but then you have like your almost like a pros and cons, but then in the middle they overlap, and so there's kind of the common ground. Like I would say that's kind of how it is within like my legal career and then my motorsports career, because I think where they come together is if I eventually want to do motorsports law, like, or practice within sports and entertainment law, which I would allow me to go work within motorsports. I'll obviously have like the connections, the mentality, kind of like of the business that I would succeed within that field. But at the same point in time, I always tell myself, like, if I'm in class and like they kind of utilize the Socratic method within law school to where they'll just randomly call on you and you just have to be ready to answer the question. And so that can be a bit daunting, right? So in reality, I just tell myself, like I race a car at 180 miles an hour. Like I've done things much presenting an argument, right? So I almost think it's like the fact of being fearless, or at least trying to be as fearless as possible. The Sam Bernstein law firm, they're actually my employer right now, as well as my sponsor. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. And so I'm grateful to have them on my race car. I've been working there for almost 4.5 years.
I forgot that you hold that
since
full-time job as well.
Yes. Yeah, so I worked there. I was an operations director for 4 years, and then now I'm starting to step into a legal role. So, because that's eventually what I'm going to be doing. So, yeah, so they're really supportive of my racing, which is great. They're really flexible with my time, which is also great because I'm being pulled in so many different directions at the same time. And so they're just really great people, really understanding. And I probably would not be able to juggle all of this if I didn't work for them. So, yeah, they're just really great, genuine people, the Sam Bernsteins.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like they really care about you. They obviously value you because they want you. They want to sponsor you, so that's really cool. That's really
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
And am I right in understanding you were the highest placing female in the USAC Silver Crown series? Could you tell us a bit about that series? It's not something that I've been familiar with until sort of researching this episode. So what sort of cars are you driving, and what are the tracks like, and what's the level of competition?
Yeah, so the USAC Silver Crown cars, which USAC is an acronym for the United States Auto Club. USAC actually used to be for IndyCar. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with like the Indianapolis 500, what Danica Patrick started racing in before she went to race NASCAR. They're very similar to Formula One cars, very similar. One of the main differences, like the racing schedule, is they race on ovals and road courses. But aside from the fact, USAC is the sanctioning body for the Silver Crown cars, which is what I predominantly race right now. And the Silver Crown cars are an open wheel aspect car. We have a roll cage. The cars weigh about 1,700 pounds with driver in them, and they're about 800 horsepower. And we race on ovals on both pavement and dirt surfaces. And the size of the tracks vary. Typically, the smallest track we'll race on with the Silver Crown cars is about a quarter to a third of a mile. And the largest we is a mile and a quarter racetrack, which was actually that track that we raced at this year. The mile and a quarter is based in St. Louis, Missouri, and we were topping 180 miles an hour. So that was really cool. That quite an experience because USAC had not had the Silver Crown cars back at this particular track since 2013. So and the Silver Crown cars used to be kind of like the feeder. Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Okay, so we're back from following a short message from our commercial providers. It's great to have Taylor Fern with us. Clearly, her internet can't keep up with her schedule, and that is a formidable challenge. So we were just hearing, Taylor, that Silver Crown. You were telling us about it. The horse miles an hour on some of the tracks, particularly in St. Louis. But you were also saying a bit of a feeder into IndyCar, which we on this show. Did you say that Mario Andretti used to be in?
Yeah, so Mario Andretti, Al Unser Jr., Tony Bettenhausen, a lot of big names within IndyCar came from the Silver Crown series. And so I have the most starts for a female within the series. I have the best finishes for a female within the series on both dirt and pavement. And I also have I'm the first female to podium, which I've done twice this season. So I know we're getting close to a win. I think it's not a matter of if, but when. I'm not an arrogant person whatsoever, but I hold a lot of
No.
confidence that I know we're getting close. And I mean, like all competitors, I go to the racetrack to win, but I feel like I say it with backing because I know how competitive I am. And we've ran in the top three
Yeah.
every Silver Crown race that we've ran in this season. So there's still one more race left this year to get it done, which I think we can do. But I mean, there's a lot of strategy that goes into these cars. They're 100-lap races, so literally anything can happen. But you know, racing's what I
Mm.
love to do, so I'm grateful to be going to the track, grateful that I have funding to do it, and really grateful that I'm able to showcase like my abilities both on the racetrack and off the racetrack as well.
I mean, you talking about having that self belief. That's something that we've picked up. We've had Mario Andretti on the show. We had Miles Rowe on the show a few weeks ago. Self belief seems to be a prerequisite for being a top driver. So yeah, it sounds like you fit the bill. You talked about like 100 races. So playing in the top three, and maybe you end up not being in the top three. Are there crashes, or is it strategy, or sort of what can happen over the race distance?
Yeah, so literally, I always say like a Silver Crown race is like going to war because like you could have for instance, the
Mm,
one racetrack that I was talking to you way miles an hour. It was on a mile and a quarter racetrack. So that race was only 80 laps, but still kind of like the distance of the track makes up for the discrepancy in the lap
mm.
difference. But at the same point in time, I was running third essentially the entire race. And with 6 laps to go, my radiator went out.
No.
And that was, yeah, and that was because we normally don't race on tracks that big, and no one had been back to these tracks since 2013. And we were going so fast,
Mm.
speed that we the way the air was coming up underneath my car was lifting my radiator up and it was hitting the pulley on my
Wow.
engine. And so that caused the radiator to go, and then therefore like all the water within the radiator leaked out, and then we almost had an engine failure with that. So it was also a blessing that I stopped when I did, because it could have been the damage could have been much worse. But there's things like you could have mechanical issues like that. Like that's obviously a super odd scenario. But
Mm.
then there also can be instances where, like there's 5 or 6 of us within the series that are super competitive, and we're normally
Mm.
always some of the top like 5 or 6 cars at the track each race, which will typically have about 25 cars at the Silver Crown
Mm.
races. And so another instance was there was one race not too long ago. I was passing for second, and it was just kind of like maybe a matter of the a racing deal, but I don't know if it was a matter of like the car that I was passing didn't want me to pass them or whatnot. But we ended up colliding. We ended up colliding, and then I ended up not finishing the race due to that collision. But it's just stuff like that that can happen. Because they are
Mm.
longer races, so you're more prone to mechanical failures, getting tangled up with another driver. So I always just try to like to start off the race by saying, let's just make it the 100 laps or to the end of the race, and we'll see what we got from there.
Yeah.
um, because there's just so many variables.
No, I can imagine. So, I mean, I'm intrigued about this story, the gateway you called it, running a car that sort of wasn't used to driving at such speeds, 180 miles an hour. What was your first that you had a problem with the radiator? Like, could you tell as you're driving? Does the power drop a little bit? Or does, how can you tell?
So, initially, right before I stopped on the track, um, I knew something was going on because it was just kind of like all of a sudden I could not there was a drastic difference in my speed to where I couldn't
Mm.
keep up with the car in front of me. And I could see that there was smoke coming out from my hood. And then I had lost, both of my gauges were not working. Both my oil and my water temperature gauge were not working. And so I started falling back, and then within a matter of a lap, I stopped on the racetrack because I didn't want to waste having, I mean, we're racing on a 1.25 mile racetrack too. So I didn't want to risk it by driving all the way back around in order to just pull in the pits. And then also strategically for the rules within the series, if I would have stopped on the race, let me back up. If I would have gone into the pits, I would have been more laps down at the end of the race than I would have been if I would have stopped on the track, because they count the caution laps. And so I wouldn't have lost as many positions either because it was so late in the race. So I was running third, and because I decided to stop on the track and not lose as many laps, I still ended up finishing ninth. So there's a little bit of a strategy play there. You also have to know the rules too. So
see, that's a crossover.
You know the rule book
inside out. Good.
But
I mean, you're revealing your secret strategy there. But how? I mean, you having the presence of mind, first of all, you know, I'm a bit competitive, probably not as competitive as you, but like if I for whatever reason found myself slightly less able to compete, you know, your engine is running out of power, I'd be furious or emotional. But in your head, you were like, right, I'm not coming into the pits. I'm going to pause. I'm going to pull over. Yeah. How do you have that presence of mind? Was it just the natural thing to do, or did you think it through?
Well, really at first, like when my engine first started smoking and I was at a loss of power, I was just kind of like, okay, at first I was like, I don't want to keep going and risk like the damage to my engine. So normally like my automatic response to that is just to stop on the racetrack. At the same sense of time, like I realized as I was stopping, I was like, from a prior experience that I had earlier in the year that benefited me by stopping on the racetrack and not going into the pits and not going laps down, I was like, okay, as I was stopping, I was like, this is actually going to work more in my favor by doing this. And then also because of my location on the track.
It sounds like you've had your share of good and bad luck this season, and we're definitely rooting for you to get your first victory, hopefully maybe in the final round of the season. But my co-host, Dens, who couldn't be here tonight, he always asks this question. In terms of luck, do you have any pre-race rituals or things that superstitions, things that you do before getting in the car?
Sorry, guys. I don't know what is going on.
It's I'm giving you my bad luck because usually it's my internet connection, but today mine apparently works. So yeah, someone always has to have some issues. It's fine. So speaking of good luck, bad luck, my co-host Dens always likes to ask this question. Do you have any superstitions or pre-race rituals that you do as you're getting into the car or preparing for a race?
Yeah, so I would say probably more so when I was younger. I used to always listen to a specific song right before I raced, or if I was kind of on a lucky streak, I would wear like that same fire suit or whatnot. Now maybe more so the one thing that I kind of stick to as like a ritual is I always have a Red Bull. Not sponsored, sidebar by them, but I'll always have a Red Bull about like an hour before like my main feature race. And so right now that's probably like just one of the main things that I stick to. Sometimes like I'll say a little prayer before or just try to like refresh my memory in order to like build my confidence up. Like I'll just think of like previous experiences that I've had that have been like positive, just to kind of like remind myself of like what I'm capable of doing, and then kind of like go through stuff with my crew chief on strategy on how we might think the race might go, and what our plan might be. But other than that, like now it's just kind of, I feel like as I progress in age, I just like I'm prone to do like rituals or kind of be paranoid, you know?
No, I guess that makes sense. But you still have your Red Bull. Maybe if you switch to Monster or
Yeah.
one of the competitors, who knows? You could be first place all
Yeah.
the time. So you're kind of painting a lovely image of the paddock. You talked about your crew chief. You talked about some of your rituals. What are you talked about 5 or 6 fellow drivers that are competitive. What's the field like? Do you get on? Do you talk off track, or like, yeah? What's that community like there?
Yeah, so typically at all the races will have between like anywhere from like 24 to 30 race cars. But
Mm,
like I mentioned prior, there'll be like 5 or 6 of us that are kind of like the main, like really fast guys, if you will, guys or gals.
mm,
Um, I would say I'm kind of one that I have the personality. I can get along with anybody. I'll talk to anybody. Just kind of have like small chat. Um, but really, I don't kind of go out of my way um, to really converse or have like a real conversation outside of my teammates. Because I mean, we all are competitors. You don't really, I have that mindset to where I don't want to get too close with my other competitors because I mean, when you're on the racetrack, no one's really your friend on the track, right? Because we're all fighting each other for position. But I think there's all a respect level amongst one another. I mean, we have the guys that we don't like, we do like, so on and so forth. That's racing. But
mm.
in hindsight, I really just try to keep to myself.
Yeah. I mean, it's all the interesting thing in all walks of life. There are different personalities, and some people get energy from being in a crowded room. Others get energy from kind of taking that step back. So let's
Mhm.
imagine you're on the track now. I'm really intrigued because you mentioned some of the ovals are got pavement on them, I think you said, and the others are sort of dirt. How do you
Yes.
adapt your driving style between those two? Is there a big difference?
There is. There is a really big difference. Some of the overlap from maybe going from a pavement track to going to a dirt track is sometimes after as the night goes on when you're racing dirt, the dirt will kind of wear away, if you will, and then it will get down to like the pavement base of the track. And we kind of refer that to like the track slickening off to where you have to drive the racetrack more so like a pavement car. So that's into play two different driving styles. But really the dirt specifically, there's multiple driving styles within that one dirt surface that you could have. Because the track consistently changes on dirt throughout the night to where you have to adjust your technique each time you're on the track. So it's definitely more technical. Um, Definitely tests the driver's experience more so. Um, and I think there's a lot more that goes into the dirt racing and the pavement racing. Some people might want to debate on that, but I guess it just depends on what background you come from. But there is overlap in ways, but at the same point in time, they're both just so different. They're both beasts of their own.
No, I can imagine. And I'm just like putting my European brain onto this. So in the UK, we have something called Speedway, which is you might have that in the
Hmm.
US, I don't know. But yeah, exactly, right. Little motorbikes. I don't think they have brakes, and you can always see that back wheel kicking out. Like it looks like they're driving straight the whole time, but the back wheel's taking them around the corner. So when you're on dirt, are you drifting? Are you doing a flick? Like how are you rotating the car through the turn?
Yeah, so I essentially call it like you're basically drifting. Because the rear part of your car is just kind of hanging out essentially throughout the turns. And you're racing on an oval dirt track. So it's not that the rear part of the car or like the rear tires will be hanging out all the way around, more so in the corners. But yeah, you are basically drifting essentially all around the racetrack. And so adjust your line based on where what they call the moisture is in the track. And you can kind of find, and like what I mean by moisture is where the car is going to want to grip up on the racetrack, to where you're not kind of spinning out per se, or causing an accident, or so on and so forth. So there's definitely there's a lot of like technicalities and a lot of like technical points that go into the dirt racing. So if you're ever in the States, definitely feel free to reach out and we'll have to get you to a dirt track.
I'm so intrigued. Yeah, I mean, because it's the way you describe it. It makes me go, okay, in the UK, what channel can I watch this on? And you're right. Obviously Mario Andretti definitely did dirt racing, didn't he? When he first came over to the US. Let's fast forward 5 years. Hopefully, glorious, wonderful place. There are no wars. There's no COVID. We're all happy.
Yeah.
Where in an ideal world, where will you be in say 5 years' time? You'd like to be in, or a place in your career that you reach?
Yeah, so 5 years, let's see, I'm 26 now, I'll be 31. So I would have won a bunch of USAC Silver Crown races, a USAC Silver Crown championship, and I would have liked to have a handful of IndyCar starts by then. Hopefully I'll be done with law school, have my law degree, and be practicing in some form or fashion, to balance the two together. But my main goal right now is I definitely want to win Silver Crown races and get to IndyCar. So, but I always say, like, generically, as long as I'm racing, I'm happy. But I also feel like at the same point in time, like, you need to have goals to chase. Otherwise, like, what are you really chasing? Just day after day. So those are kind of things that I've set for myself.
I mean, you have laser focus, which is another characteristic that sort of Mario Andretti and Miles Rowe and lots of others shared, that we've interviewed. That's really, I really hope that that happens and that you are in IndyCar, and then at least I'll know someone in IndyCar. It'd be great. So tell me, like, imagine. All right. So I looked at the calendar this season, and watch it when it was Champ Car. The Indy Racing League came about. It all got very confusing, and we didn't have it on TV anymore in the UK for a while. But now, this season, I think there were only 4 ovals. I might be wrong, but around that, like 4 ovals, and the rest was road courses or street tracks. Like, would you see yourself as being, I guess, an oval specialist? What happens if you were on a street track? Is that something you feel confident you would dial into?
A great racing driver is capable of being successful in whatever car they get into, and that's something that I am interested in doing, although I do have limited circuit track road course experience. I've only probably been on a road course twice in a Formula 2000 car throughout my 20 years in racing, but that's not something that I'm intimidated by. I would say, I mean, I grew up racing ovals. I've raced ovals my entire career. So if I did make it to IndyCar, like, depending, hypothetically, if I had the opportunity to race the entire IndyCar season, I would do whatever it took to be successful and compete and run up front on a road course, because I feel like if I'm dedicating all my time to doing that, I have time. Part of me is also like, I've been perfecting ovals for the past 20 years of my career. Would I also want to go up against people who have been karting since they're 5 years old and have been racing on circuit court or circuit tracks their entire lives as well? But I guess the answer to that is, I guess we'll see. Like, I always go back to what I said earlier on, like, if you're a great racing driver, you can race any car that you get into, no matter the surface, the course type, so on and so forth. So that is definitely something I'm willing to do, if the opportunity presented itself. And I hope that I get the opportunity eventually to do that, because I think I would be just as competitive as I am anything else.
Yeah, and I hear the conviction in your voice, and wholeheartedly. I'm intrigued. Like, I'm intrigued. We've had a few people we've spoken to. So we talked to Sabra Cook on one episode, We talked to Miles Rowe on another. He's the first black guy to win an IndyCar sanctioned event. And it seems like we're in 2022. But when I heard you saying, you have the most starts in the Silver Crown, it does. Yeah, it is for women in Miles's case, a black guy on the road to Indy. You're a part of the movement, Women in Motorsport. What are you like thinking specifically about women here? What's your honest assessment and perspective about being decades time and maybe why it's still 2022 and we still haven't got that parity in the field?
Yeah, I definitely think it's from when I started racing until now, there is some difference as to how many females are within motorsports. But there is still not that many, especially within the higher ranks. Just because the proportionality of the fallout rates, or the drop-off rates, if you will, as people progress up the ladder for females, it is such an exaggerated higher percentage rate or proportionality rate than it is for the males. It's actually pretty astonishing. It just seems like once females get to a certain point within their motorsports career, other opportunities maybe present themselves, and it's almost kind of like the glass ceiling effect because there is not that many visible successful females within motorsports. And that's obviously something that we're trying to, if we can, fix or at least try to mitigate with Women in Motorsports North America, as I know that there is other women in motorsports groups within other countries. And so if there's anything by me being like, when I first started racing USAC, the USAC sanctioning body, there were no females in the Silver Crown series. So I always questioned if that's something that I would even have the opportunity of doing because there was no one before me. And so I think the same can be said. There have been a handful of females that came through IndyCar. Danica Patrick won. Sarah Fisher set a lot of records within IndyCar, but there still is not anyone that's super visible that's actually succeeding within the field. And I think the same can be said within NASCAR as well. Same thing with Formula One. And so I think the question comes back to, why is this happening? Why are the drop-off rates for the females much higher than males as you progress up the ladder? And I mean, there's just so many different answers, and I could probably talk about this on like an entire segment because I have so many opinions on it. But I think motorsports in general is just a really, really tough sport, like mentally, physically, financially, so on and so forth. And I think in a matter of time, like assuming we get the proportionality rates of females up from the lower tiers, I think that will just kind of trickle up the ladder as well. So hopefully I feel like in 10 years we're having a different conversation. But I feel like there still needs to be more progressive discussions on this and continued progressive discussions on this. Because I feel like if you believe you can do it, or if someone else can do it, like you're just as capable of doing something as anybody else. And so I just think that's the mentality that needs to be spread.
You made a really great point earlier when you talked about having aspirations. You were talking about winning multiple races, winning the championship, having some starts in IndyCar at least within the next 5 years, as well as your career, as well as your family. Having those aspirations drags you further than if you didn't. I really hope that we're able to see women succeed. And I don't know, maybe this is not correct for me to say, but it feels like it's almost an added burden. Like, why should, there are no men in motorsport having to try and, have that pressure on their back or have to think about paving the way for men. So I really wish, wish the rates improve at the success. I hope that you're one of the key case studies as well.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I know that I actually had a conversation with my, it was just in this aspect of motorsports that I'm in, I've always kind of been the only female within the races that I'm participating in. And as the season has gone on, it's just like you always, and I don't want to make it a gender thing at all, but I just think a lot of the things that happen, it's just, why do I feel like I'm always fighting this constant battle against all of these guys when, because I know I'm fast, like I know I'm competitive, and it's almost like they're threatened by that because there's never been a female within this division to really dust it up with them. And so it's honestly, if I was to list all the examples of kind of like the nonsensical things that have come out throughout this season, my race season, it's really astonishing. And I don't want to say it's a gender thing. It could be just because I'm the only girl and maybe they're threatened by me. I mean, if I was them, I'd be threatened by me, but I mean, it's just interesting. Like, motorsports is already tough enough, but I think really being a female within the field, it just makes it much tougher.
Yeah. I don't want to cheapen the battle by comparing it to men specifically, but when you look at, say, Lewis Hamilton as a black driver coming into Formula One, the adversity that he went through, the go-karting series, and even in Formula One, we've seen perhaps the way he's been treated differently, or the kind of amount of defending other drivers will do against him versus, you know, I hope it isn't because, you know, you or others are being
Any difference.
But
when I hear your stories, I hear
Sabre Cook stories, and I hear, you know, from others, it feels like you guys have to be even better. So you are actually, you end up being even better than your field. So I hope that does give you the energy and you know, it's honed you, it's sharpened you to be even better than the field. And I wish you every.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's made me mentally tough, and I am definitely I'm not contextual wise, I'm not playing a victim at all. It's definitely a matter of circumstance, and this was the path that I chose. And if I'm the one that's got to take it on the chin, I'll take it on the chin, because I love racing. I love motorsports. I do love and respect the guys that I race against. So I definitely didn't want to make it something about gender, but sometimes I think it's kind of ironic. But at the end of the day, it is the matter of circumstance. And I really appreciate you guys having me on, and I've enjoyed the conversation.
Brilliant. Well, I'm really invested now. I need to. Is your series on YouTube? Is it online? Is it on the? Where can we watch you? Where can we hear more from you about your journey and your championship?
Yes, so my races are broadcasted on a subscription-based service called Flow Racing, FLO racing.com. And so they broadcast my races on that streaming service. And then you can also keep up with my racing on, I have a YouTube channel, my website, my social media. So yeah.
Brilliant. Well, that's fantastic. Let me finish a quick question. Sort of snap questions that we always ask.
And it's really interesting to see the differences in answers.
Well, you've probably got a lecture, or I don't know, you're doing testing or something. You're a busy person. Any car on any track today. What track are you picking? What car are you picking?
Does it have to be a street car, or is it a race car? Or
it can be any. It could be a racing car. It could be a street. Whatever you. So you could have all the options in the universe.
Okay, so I think it would really be really cool to test or drive a kind of like a Porsche 911 on like the road course, like what they race on for the Rolex 24, or one of the prototype cars that race within the IMSA series. I think that would be really cool.
And why do I have the feeling it's a pipe dream? I'm going to see Flow Racing in about a year's time, and you're doing that. So yeah, that'd be amazing to see. Okay, we have a random sort of. It's called, what is it called? It's called Taxi. Come on, George, you've got to help me. What is it called? It's called taxi, dinner, and then what's the final one? I can't remember. It's a very PG version of Snog, Marry, Avoid. Avoid? Okay, Avoid. I don't know which series you're following. We like Formula One. We like IndyCar. Maybe you're following IndyCar, so it have relevance for our audience. You have to pick one of three. You have to pick three drivers. One of them is going to be a great driver, is going to drive you to the restaurant. The other one is you're going to have the meal with because they've got a great personality. And then finally, there's one you're just going to have to avoid because you just don't like them. And maybe you're super diplomatic, and I should reframe it. So taxi, dinner, avoid. And if it could be IndyCar drivers, all the better for our audience. But actually, it can be any driver if that's helpful for you.
Yeah, taxi, Max
Okay.
Verstappen. Dinner, Daniel Ricciardo. And then the one that I want to avoid is Esteban Ocon.
Ooh, spill the tea. Why? Why do you want to avoid Esteban Ocon? What's he done to you?
No, I don't know. I don't know any of these. I don't know any of them personally. Sidebar. When you watch, and it also could be the way that maybe they portray them on the Formula One Drive to Survive, or maybe the way that they present themselves when I watch the Formula One races. Really not much tea. That's just one that I've just politically correct. Just want to say I'd avoid.
Maybe because Esteban Ocon was not defending like a lion.
Yeah.
Well, also I chose to have dinner with Daniel Ricciardo, and I heard Ricciardo and Ocon don't really get along. I don't know if that's true or not, but
Ocon hasn't really gotten on with any of his teammates, going all the way back to Pascal Wehrlein, where they were both in a small team. And yeah, Alonso doesn't really like him. They had the year at Renault with Ricciardo and Perez, and Ocon crashed every week. So maybe you've got that racer's instinct where you can just see someone that you can't trust on track. But I'm putting words in your mouth. Of course you didn't say that.
Yeah, no, please don't take me out of context.
Yeah, no, it's all right. All of the fake news is going to be quoting. No, I'm joking.
Yeah, I can see the headlines now.
Yeah. So here's the final question. This is the main event. Thing that they're all waiting for, right? So we all know that it's humanly impossible not to like pizza. Okay, so I'll assume that you love pizza. So on that pizza, okay. Like, will it be acceptable or not? Do you have pineapple on pizza or not?
I do. I will eat pineapples on pizza. Yes.
Taylor, have I told you that I'm going to love you now?
Do you think it's acceptable? I guess I'm going to do the question reversal.
Ooh. This is the psychology. This is very good. This is your courtroom technique.
Yes.
So the pineapple is there a right or wrong answer?
No, that's the interesting thing, because it tells a lot about people's personalities. So Mario Andretti was like, absolutely not. He just had that straight. Miles Rowe was more very thoughtful, sort of him personally, no, but he would stand up for the rights of people to choose. It was brilliant. So you were quite a positive.
Matt Gallagher was like, hell yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So
I'm more of a
my personality. Yeah, my personality is I will basically eat anything you put in front of me. So to me, pineapple on pizza is acceptable. No, but I also like trying different things. So that's kind of my, if you will, politically correct answer. But I think it's acceptable.
Okay, good. I mean, yeah, it sounded like if you had to eat it, you would. And yeah, you would explore it. But let's see, maybe not your favorite. Fantastic. Taylor, before we go, is there any sort of message you want to leave for those listening, people that might not know you, or indeed your fans? Anything you want to say?
Yeah, I just want to say, first off, to you guys for having me on, and to the listeners for listening to me babble on for the past maybe hour or so. And I really just think a lot of like what we talked about, and maybe an example of my career just all comes back to really just never giving up, and you can really do anything you set your mind to, if that's something you want to do and you set your sights on. So that's really just the message that I would like to share.
Thank you. It's a really
Yeah.
uplifting, positive message and a great way to end the episode. Well, thank you, Taylor, for your time. It's been really fantastic. Best of luck in what you're doing. We're all going to check out flowracing.com. We're also going to check out your website, YouTube, etc. Those that are listening that aren't subscribed, please do subscribe to Stripping the Dipping as well while you're there. This has been F1 Blag, fantastically joined by Taylor Ferns, who's definitely not sponsored by Red Bull, definitely doesn't have beef with Esteban Ocon, but is a fantastic racing driver and an even greater conversation. We'll see you next time on Stripping the Dipping. Good night.